it certainly seems to me after literally 6 or 8, because I approach this with great care and great trepidation because it goes against everything I believe in. But yet, the more I studied it, the more it seemed to be true. The more I studied the scriptures, the more it seemed to be true. And again, I'm going to take the word of Yahweh over the word of Neil deGrasse Tyson or all these other monkey men scientists that are dumb enough to believe they came from monkeys. Why should we trust them about the nature of the cosmos?
Hey everyone, just wanted to throw this video together real quick and share with you something that I saw the other day on Saturday. Bill Schnoebelen actually released a video about 30 minutes long giving his take on the flat earth, and I was quite surprised to see that, but um, very excited actually. It's a pretty big deal in my opinion, and so I'll leave the link below and you can go check that out. It's definitely worth watching. In about 30 minutes he really just kind of encapsulates the whole thing. Not really saying anything new, but he referred to Skiba a few times and really gives him, some good shout outs. So that should be pretty encouraging to Rob, I would think too. But yeah, just goes through the whole thing, and first kind of focuses mainly on the scriptural side, and then mentions the scientific proofs and the NASA fakery and all that, and then also gets into a little bit about the evolution connection, the UFO connection, and the cult of scientism, as he calls it, and all that stuff. So yeah, he gets it, and of course he gets it because if you know anything about Bill Schnoebelen, I mean, this guy's been talking about the Illuminati and the New World Order and things like the UFO alien deception since probably before some of you were even born. So yeah, it's pretty exciting from a lot of those standpoints because he really does bring it back. It just even what he has to say about truth and about being willing to seek out a matter, you know, just this is really cool. So um, I'm hoping to maybe even reach out to him and I don't know, think about doing an interview or just talk to him and ask him a lot of questions that I have. Um, some of you might remember that, I don't know, however many months back it was, I actually put out a video called Flat Earth and the Invasion of the Space Gods, and I'm featuring a bunch of clips from a talk that he gave at this UFO conference many years ago, and where he's talking about Aleister Crowley and H.P. Lovecraft and the connections between science fiction and the occult and all that. And so what a of course at that time I had no idea whether he was gonna ever really even look at the flat Earth, but apparently he has been. It sounds like he's been looking into it for a little while and kind of just really taking a serious look. And I want to be completely fair and not misrepresent him. He's not calling himself a flat earther or whatever at this point. Um, and I think, he's still looking at it and still, but he's, like I said, that's totally fair because he's just, wanting to be careful and not just jump into anything. And I think most of us, that's, how we were for a long time too. I don't know. At one point, I just finally kind of said, okay, you know, I'm about as convinced as you can get. You still have questions all the time, but he's basically at that point where, maybe you're still unsure. Maybe there's still a lot of, you're still not, it's not looking good for the globe, is what he says. And what was especially cool was that he said, if you're a King James only kind of person and you're into your literal, Bible interpretation, then you're kind of hosed when it comes to the globe. Like, he's definitely, in that position of where, once the blinders kind of come off and you go back and look at all these verses and just, you can't see a heliocentric universe in there anymore. So very cool stuff. And what's also interesting is that when I was making that first video, the invasion of the space gods, and including the clips that I did, there was also another segment that I was really wanting to include, but I kind of didn't have time to do it at that period, so it didn't make the cut. But now that he's come out and said all that he's going to say, now there's nothing to hold me back. So this is another one of those things that, okay, when I was first looking into the flat earth and this whole idea of an enclosed cosmology and what are all the ramifications of spiritual dimensions and outer space, and what's really going on, and what are they really hiding, what are they really coding, and all the stuff that I've talked about in many videos. One of the things I started even thinking about early on was this thing that he shares about in his testimony and in various talks, but specifically about this experience that he had where he was in some sort of spiritual state, and when he was into the deep occult and went to this place called the Cathedral of Pain, which he basically was sucked up into space and taken to one of the moons of Saturn. And it sounds pretty crazy, but so I found that here's a clip where he's talking about that, but then there's also before that several different things that so just listen to this, because it's crazy how, listen to this through the lens of an enclosed biblical cosmology, right? And the idea of quote unquote outer space being possibly way more having to do with the spiritual realms and the demonic realm, possibly, at least certain elements of it having to do with the demonic realm and so on. So just check this out, and I think you'll be as amazed as I was. So here you go.
The key thing that he taught me was how to open up portals to Sirius B and thence to Universe B. Let me explain what that means. You probably heard, I think you heard, in fact, Michael talk earlier about the star system, the star Sirius. Sirius is a red giant star that's the most prominent star in the heavens, and it's in the Canis Minor constellation. It's called the Dog Star. And in fact, it's interesting, there's a line in Crowley's Book of the Law, is God to live in a dog? Because God and dog, God backwards is dog. Anyway, there's this strange tribe in Africa that for hundreds of years, part of it, they worship the star god Sirius. And interesting enough, one of the names of Sirius, which is the evilest star in the Egyptian pantheon, is the Eastern Star. So the next time you see those Order of the Eastern Star, nice little temples and everything, with their upside down satanic pentagrams as their logo, think of that. Anyway, this tribe claimed that there was a dark twin to Sirius, even though they had no telescopes, they had no nothing. And they only found out after they got radio telescopes that Sirius does have a dark twin, and it's Sirius B. And magicians understand that by invoking Sirius B, they can go into other dimensions and other universes and conquer those universes, use the power from those universes to fuel their own magical power. That's part of satanic theology. Next slide. You do this through what is called the tunnels of Typhon. And Typhon is an Egyptian destroyer god. Through the use of voodoo. See, a lot of people think voodoo is this very primitive, we looked at it very kind of, I hate to say it, in a racist way, kind of condescendingly. It's actually an extremely sophisticated magical system. And you notice this word here, Qliphoth. Qliphoth is the Hebrew word for shell or harlot. And this is the backside of the Kabbalistic tree of life. And it's the evilest part of all Jewish mysticism. And naturally, dummy me, I was invoking it. You travel through these tunnels of Typhon into other dimensions through non-Euclidean geometry, and we used applied evil and terror as energy constructs. I was taught how to perform masses to star gods and crystalline intelligences from other galaxies in order to gain more and more power. See, this is like a weird blend of Satanism and science fiction. And I guess that's what I want you to get off of this. Next slide. The other thing we did is that he taught me in voodoo there is a thing called the Loa. These are like the great old ones of voodoo from an African perspective. And you see here this very strange This is what's called a veve. And if you've ever looked at documentaries about Haiti and voodoo, they draw these either on buildings or they draw them with flour on the ground. They're extremely elaborate, and they're used. This is like the veve of Dambala, who's one of their main deities. Next slide. Now, isn't this interesting? This is they call this Bois, Grand Bois des Îles, which means the great forest under the sea. And I learned from this guy that this is Cthulhu. This is their icon of Cthulhu. And notice how much it looks like an alien, a gray alien. Next slide. Now, this is my last autobiographical experience. Well, not quite. This was very illuminating. And I'll leave it to you whether this is actually something that happened as an alien abduction or was a satanic ritual. I was home alone in my parents' house. My wife didn't come with me. I was visiting them. I was asleep in my bed. All of a sudden, I was carried out of my bed, thought I was dreaming. A lot of UFO abductees think that. I was carried up through the roof into outer space. I went through hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles of space out to one of the moons of Saturn. When I got to the moon of Saturn, I was placed down there, and there was this man who was one of my mentors in real life, an illuminist mentor, and he said, "Welcome to the Cathedral of Pain." I wasn't sure I liked the sound of that. There was this giant black obsidian, very obscene-looking building, unlike any, I can't even describe it. I tried to paint it once, and it didn't even come out right. I was led into this. Inside of this cathedral, the walls, instead of like stained glass like you might see in a normal cathedral, there were these like giant aquariums. And this ghostly blue light from these aquariums illuminated the cathedral. And floating in these giant tanks were hundreds of mutilated naked human bodies. Hundreds of them. Children, adults, men, women, didn't matter. And I was led up to this altar, and I was made to be strapped down on this altar. And all these people came out in black robes, and they were chanting in French, blasphemous things. Don't ask me why French, but they were. And then all of a sudden, on this throne in the distance, where I hadn't noticed before, this being started manifesting, scintillating. And it appeared part of the time to be a goat, a giant goat. Part of the time it appeared to be a winged bull, and part of the time it appeared to be a, did the screensaver go? Oh, there we go. And part of the time it appeared to be a beautiful blonde man. And this being came down to where I was laying strapped on this altar. I wasn't feeling too good about this. And he had these giant talons. He was like 20 feet tall. And he took one of his talons and he buried it in my forehead, right in my third eye. And I felt this searing pain. You can still see the scar. And it was like my whole brain turned into white-hot pain. And he said, "Now you belong to me, body, soul, and spirit." And then he pulled his hand out, and at that moment, like a thunderclap, I was falling back to earth at the speed of light, and I landed in my backyard in a mass of flame and lightning. And at that moment, oddly enough, what came to my mind are the words, oddly enough, of Jesus, where he said, "Behold, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven." And the ground was actually smoldering around me. The lawn was this big mass of burned grass. And I just staggered back into the house and had the world's worst headache and fell asleep. And fortunately, my father didn't think to ask me why there was a big burn thing on the lawn the next day. Now, what was that? Was that an alien abduction? Was that a satanic initiation? You decide.